Bureau XCOM Declassified was met with severe scrutiny upon its announcement way back in 2010. Since then, the game has changed significantly, including a switch from being a first-person game to instead being a third-person experience. Thanks to Firaxis' excellent 2012 release in XCOM Enemy Unknown, the Bureau XCOM Declassified has some big shoes to fill. The question is, did 2K Marin pull it off? The Bureau XCOM Declassified sets the storytelling tone early on as you meet the main character, Agent William Carter, and other members of the eventual XCOM operation. From the introductions, you're met fairly quickly with the facts of Agent Carter's depressing past. Unfortunately, you also begin to realize that you're about to be following one of the most lifeless and uninteresting protagonists for the duration of the Bureau. Agent Carter never becomes relatable or even remotely likable in any way. It isn't just him, however, as every character in the game feels either underutilized or lacking any form of interesting characteristic. It also doesn't help that the voice actors turned in a barren performance.
For now, my job is also keeping the public from knowing the scope of the threat.
Early on in the game, despite the poor characters, I couldn't help but be hooked to the B-grade sci-fi story that was forming. It starts off fairly simple with the standard alien invasion, but as things begin to trudge forward, you start to realize that maybe there's a little more than what you think going on. When this little more reveals itself, I was taken aback how incredibly stupid it was. Still, as the game continued forward, I began to enjoy the stupidity to the point where I was chuckling at the obviously very serious late-game cutscenes. While the story does indeed squander its potential, it at least garners a few laughs all the way up until its senseless ending. All throughout, while the XCOM franchise is known for making you care about your partners in battle to the end that losing them is felt deeply, the squad mates you take into combat in the Bureau not only lack any kind of defining story, they also lack any kind of personality whatsoever. There's absolutely no attention paid to your partners here, and that ultimately makes it very difficult to care about them. You can change your mates' names and uniform colors, but that's about as far as the Bureau goes in attempting to establish a connection with them. It would have been nice to see Agent Carter interact with his partners outside of combat, or even in combat. It would have been nice, as it seems like you don't have a single conversation with your teammates throughout the entire game. But in a nice touch, you can send members of your crew out on separate missions, and they level up and return to you with some sort of reward. You can level up each of your characters, including yourself, and along the way you encounter some unique abilities. As far as the pure combat goes, if you were worried about working the classic XCOM strategic elements into a third-person shooter, fear not. 2K Marin has done just that and done it well. The setup is surprisingly simplistic and very accessible. As you approach a combat situation, before any enemy is alerted, you can pop up your battle focus menu. From there, you begin to select certain actions for you and your squad to perform. The battle focus is a circular menu that you rotate your left stick around to select abilities. This system works fairly well, with the only issue being that using the left stick to select an ability can be occasionally inaccurate. There were a few times that I accidentally selected an ability beside the one I wanted, but this small gripe doesn't get in the way of the otherwise fun combat. I was legitimately surprised at how often I enjoyed spreading my soldiers apart and then activating a certain line of abilities to take out the opposing enemies. The combat and its setup are reminiscent of Mass Effect, but thanks to the battle focus feature, the Bureau diverges by having more varied and explosive possibilities in combat. The feeling you get after taking down an elite muton by combining your squad's abilities, all the while just skimming by on health, is one that makes you want to put your controller down and do a Tiger Woods-esque fist pump. This late in the generation, visual expectations for any game that runs the Unreal Engine are going to be low. If you go into the Bureau with that mindset, you won't be too disappointed by the bland visual style. There are some nice visual set pieces and varied environments, but the Unreal Engine clearly holds the game back from achieving its true visual potential. However, the Xbox 360 version does maintain a solid frame rate of 30 frames per second, and the well-designed interface is a positive, something that's key in a strategy-focused game. Every inch of the screen is used perfectly, but the user interface never becomes too in your face that it distracts from the combat. In most cases, the Bureau handles pathfinding generally well. A button press on the D-pad displays a marker to identify your destination, but it is absolutely bewildering that this assistance is not available for certain sections of the game. At one point, I was required to find a certain area that I had never been to, and there was no marker to help find it. I then wandered around the base for upwards of an hour and a half wondering where to go. these occasional situations do a great job of killing any kind of momentum that the game builds. It's a tall order for 2K Marin to compete with Firaxis' excellent XCOM Enemy Unknown, but in the end, the Bureau is a completely different game that stands on its own. While they didn't make the next game of the year, 2K Marin has crafted their own XCOM adventure. It is one that features some lifeless characters and a nonsensical story, but also some of the best squad-based third-person shooting you're going to see all year.
Hit it hard!
Take an aim!
Revolution going on!